Welcome to SR Studios. We are highlighting a ministry today. I am so excited for this, guys. My name is Maria Buffolino, and I'm sitting with some ladies that I can't even tell you how they've impacted my life just by watching how they are obedient to the Lord. And these are the people that are behind the scenes. These are people that have been here for years, and they have literally spewed out so much wisdom in my own life. And I'm just so excited that I'm sitting here with you guys all together and what we're going to be talking about today, which is mission. So if we can go around the table and just introduce ourselves, maybe share how long you've been at the church, and then later we'll go back around and maybe talk about why missions has been something that's been impressed on your heart by the Lord.
Well, I'm Donna Brady. We've been at this church since 1991. It's been a long time. So our kids were raised here, and first it was Manhasset, then Syosset. Now we're at Westbury. What sparked missions? I grew up in São Paulo, Brazil. So my life has been missions. My mom and dad are still active in their 80s. They're still mentoring missionaries. So it's kind of been a big part of my life from day one.
It's beautiful.
So, Barbara, and I've been here since it began, and all my kids came through here and been raised in this church, and my passion for missions has been from this church as it's grown so beautifully. And I just feel that God calls and seeks the heart of man, and he calls us as ambassadors to Christ, and Christ taking on the heart of servanthood and compassion and kindness and gentleness. And so my walk has been in following that path in the relationship that I have with God, and seeing, what he emerged from that, both in my work locally through Guardian Angel and internationally. Originally, it was never a journey that I thought I would take on the missions field, but in the walk that he gave me was a spirit of compassion and a heart to serve. And so from then, it was just in the walk of obedience and service and just following the Lord in that. And that's when he sort of revealed the direction that I would need to go, and just trusting him in that faith walk.
Yeah.
We're going to unpack all that, but do you see
that
what
was
I
a lot.
mean?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? Even by the introduction, I'm sure this is a treat for the listeners.
Yeah.
Well, I'm MaryAnn Dantona, and I actually gave my life to Christ across the parking lot. And when I did, was Pastor Mackey was here at the time, and it was Bible Baptist Church. It was before Shelter Rock and Bible Baptist merged. So I've physically been in this space in Syosset for many decades at this point. But I think that when I gave my life to Christ, I knew that it was more than I'm going to be forever changed, but I also felt a calling, and I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that God was preparing me for something. And as I started to walk forward in my walk with Jesus, I just realized that he didn't just say, I died on the cross for you, but I died on the cross so that you can receive me, but then go out to the world and tell others. Amen. So as I matured in my faith, I looked around me, and I started to see people that I admired in the church and what they were doing. And a lot of them were hosting missionaries at their homes. And I said, someday, if I'm lucky enough, blessed enough to have a home, I want to host missionaries. I want to hear what's going on around the world. I want to know. I want to be able to, pour into the missionaries as they come, not knowing that the Lord was going to call me to something even more, meaning go, So I've just done short-term missions, but I've just enjoyed many missions trips and experiences, and had hundreds of missionaries stay at my home since then. And I just feel very blessed that the Lord has, called me to this, and my family. So
And you're also leading the missions committee here at Shelter Rock Church.
Yes,
Yes.
I am co-chairing with Fred Hines, and a quick funny story on that one is that when Bible Baptist, Syosset Bible Baptist was starting to kind of end its time as a church, and they were going to merge. Shelter Rock was going to merge. One of the things that made me so sad was that when we didn't know about Shelter Rock yet, and when our remnant of the people that were left at Shelter Rock, at Bible Baptist, had decided that we don't have any more money. We can't even, we met actually in this building for church on some Sundays because we couldn't heat the church. So I think
This building right here.
This building right here.
Which
we
I tell you
actually-
is a
yeah.
bedroom, like the size of a bedroom.
Well, there was only about 12 to 20 of us, left. But when that was happening and we had to actually tell the missionaries that we were supporting for years and we had relationships with, that we couldn't support them anymore. And to me, that was a sign of death, you know what I mean? And I just felt I was so sad. And so when I heard about Shelter Rock and the merge was going to happen, I got very excited. And I looked up right away, well, who is the lead of missions at Shelter Rock? And it was Fred Hines. So I wrote him a letter. And I said, listen, I told him about my heart and how broken it was when we had to let our missionaries go. But I said, but there's one particular couple at the time was living in a tent in Sudan. And I said, and I just want to ask if Shelter Rock would just take this one couple, just this one couple, and consider supporting them. And it was Russ and Lynn Noble. I don't mind telling you because they know the story well. And so I wrote the letter and I sent it. Don't even know who Fred Hines is. I had no idea that, decades later, here we'd be. But I sent the letter and I got a phone call from him. And he said, hey, I received your letter. And he said, and I'd like to meet and, talk. And I want to hear more about the missionaries that were let go. How many were there? And would you consider splitting the list into 2 waves so that we can not only start supporting the first wave, but then consider the second wave as well when we see how we get ourselves off the ground. And in my mind, that was such a God thing that it wasn't going to be this one couple. When we ask for something, God always does so much more. It wasn't the one couple. It was I think it was like 8 that were the first wave or something around there. And we did. We took him on right away. Yeah. And then he said, and by the way, as a representative of the church that we just merged with, would you come on the missions board? So that was in 2005, I guess we decided, right? Yeah. So 2005, so I've been on the missions board since 2005. Yeah. And now Fred and I are co-chairing, and we've had a wonderful, wonderful experience all the way through. So
I remember that.
Yeah.
Taking the missionaries. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure there was a vote or something that happened.
Yeah, and it was important.
Yeah.
It was an important piece that this was the one thing that we, it wasn't costing us anything to do this merge, except for we were going to take on missionaries, and that was.
And we were such a hurting little remnant.
Yeah.
We were such a hurting group of people. We were trying so hard to see God. Where is your hand in this? Where are you in this? And when I heard about the merge, I said, I think that's what he's doing, And then when when Fred had said, well, we're going to consider taking on the missionaries, that was the salve that started to help the healing for me personally. Like we're going to start to be a mission-minded, church again. So, yeah. So
I can't wait to get deeper in that because I don't think many in the church know how many missionaries we support locally, globally. So I'm excited to dive into that.
Yeah. We're still at introductions, right? Okay. So I'm Helen Tay. I'm actually on staff with the church. I work in sort of a strategy and operations role. So my involvement in missions for Shelter Rock Church is just sort of acting in this strategic manner. What does it look like today? How are we being missional locally, regionally, and globally? And what does it look like tomorrow? And on. But what's really exciting for me is kind of meeting ladies like yourself and all of our teams, and whether they're local food pantry teams or global missions teams or missionaries, there's so many different ways that our church is, moving on behalf of people who are not even in our buildings.
Yeah.
So I just find that to be so exciting, and I see like God's hand moving in these ways through the hearts and the passions of people like yourselves. So I've taken part in some of our mission trips here,
Yes.
Guatemala, Honduras, but what changed my heart for missions was a trip that I took with my former church. I've been at Shelter Rock about 10 years, but the trip I took was to Cambodia. And in Cambodia, it was my first mission trip. As an adult, I had my 2 little kids at home. I think they were 2 years old, 5 years old. And I went for 2 weeks to Cambodia.
Wow. Yeah.
And at the time, I had a career in fintech. I'm like in the city every day working. And I thought, this is life. This is what we do. This is how you make a way for yourself in the world. And I was working and taking care of my family, all these things. But I remember that time in Cambodia, just seeing what really is on God's heart and what breaks God's heart.
Yes.
Started to break mine. But not only that, because yes, there's need, and yes, there's justice work. There's all kinds of renewal work that's needed in the world. But what I saw was my own spiritual blindness. That I'm going through life thinking, this is life. I'm doing this, and I go to church on Sunday. But there was something that happened in that place, in that space, in just asking God to open a pathway, open a door.
That's great.
Create an encounter, put something on my heart, that walking so closely with God in that every day, in that place of need and brokenness and really just darkness, that I was like, what have I been doing at home? Why am I not doing this every day as a part of my own life and walk and faith journey? And it took me a long time to sort of incorporate that in meaningful ways. But I would say that trip to Cambodia was the thing that, opened my eyes to my blindness.
I think I had a similar experience when I came to Honduras with you ladies, because I felt like the church should be on mission in this way, even back at home. Like, we're all called to be on mission with whatever sphere of influence we have. And so I love that you said that, because I think when people talk about mission, of course, we think about these mission trips. And so what we want to really think about is the fact that we're coming alongside the people group that we're going to meet. It's not where, when we look at the Great Commission, like, go out and make disciples, it's not like we're coming in as these like saviors, heroes. We're really going there to learn, to embed ourselves in their culture, to experience life the way they experience, and how can we see God's hand move in that? There's a great book called Experiencing God. It's an oldie, but a goodie, Henry Blackaby. And it talks about, and I see that with you ladies all the time, it's like, where is God moving?
Right.
And how can I be a
how-
part of what God is doing, rather than creating my own sense of like what I should be doing?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
Helen, you said, break my heart for what breaks yours. That was my prayer when I was in Haiti years ago. And I would just say, Lord, just break my heart for what breaks yours. And then at one point I was writing and I was saying, okay, Lord, you broke my heart. And now what am I going to do about it? What do I need to do about it? I want to see what you want us to see.
Yeah.
But then I want to be motivated and tell us, now what are we supposed to do about it? I don't just want to see it. I want to know what I'm supposed to do about it.
if you could tell the church family like about missions, like what would you tell them that maybe we don't know, like how many missionaries, because you've been on how many trips also? Yeah, I don't think you could count.
I can't. I stopped counting. I stopped counting that.
I asked her what she's like, I don't know.
No, I know it's over 30, but I don't know how many over 30, but I know it's over 30. But they're short-term missions, and not to minimize that, but because they're meaningful and they're purposeful, and they have, there's just a lot of richness that comes from doing that. But I think that we have missionaries all around the world, from Thailand to here, to we have them in the Middle East, we have them in Central America. They're in all different places. Some are in places that we can't talk about, and then some are in places that we get to visit, and that we get to see, and that's amazing. But I have to be honest with you that as much as I can't count the amount of missions trips I've been on, we recently had a little bit of a shift in our focus in missions. And when we did that as a church, we had to say goodbye to some of our missionaries, which was the timing was appropriate and it was right, and our focus was just different. So we're just going to try to stay within the focus. So I know the people that we have, but I don't know the number because as I was considering the people and what they're doing and where they're doing it, that I know.
Yes.
But the actual number, I don't think I took notice of.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, when I started working on staff about 3 years ago, we had over 60.
It was about
Yes.
60.
Yeah, like 65 missionaries
It was
and
60.
organizations
Yeah.
we supported.
I think we're down now like 35, 40. That's my guess.
30 or 40.
But I honestly didn't write number 1, number 2, number 3. I just said, these people in that area. and,
Yes.
whatever. So,
But that's part of like a very intentional shift
intentional, yes.
because I do think that we're partnering strategically with different organizations and individual missionaries around the world in ways that make more sense cohesively. So, our church recently did the World Vision, child sponsorship, chosen event, and we've been sending money to World Vision separately to those areas. So that's like a long-term, like strategic partnership with organizations. I mean, we partner with Barbara's organization, Guardian Angel, and hopefully you can tell us a little bit more about
as
that.
we were saying, we're trying to see
Yeah.
where God moves, and it seems like God is moving in Honduras.
Yeah.
Yes.
So talk
Yes.
a little bit
Yes,
about
very
that.
powerfully. The faith walk is hearing the presence of God, and that's always time restraints and holding back and waiting for Him to
To actually speak
and move, and then we go, which Donna and MaryAnn have both been very involved in that. But when we see God moving in that, He presents things to us, and then we'll go in, like for an instance, for the sewing room, we had the school and the gardens, and Donna came over to do a lot of the bookkeeping there. And, we just go with the things that we feel equipped to do. I'll go over and do the bookkeeping, and maybe I'll do some sewing outside with some of the ladies. But that's the heart of God,
Yeah.
And
And then God takes that little idea and went whoosh,
Right.
and then He shows it. And then, and you talked about partnering. And, God doesn't really have us go alone, even though we start,
Yes.
stepping out of the boat.
It's a little scary, yeah.
Very scary. And, He encourages us. And, it's like, with Moses, like He's not going to let your hands fall.
Yeah, He brings people.
He brings people
Yes.
at the time
Yes.
that it's needed. But also He wants to see what your obedience is.
Right.
That personal relationship of who you are with Him, and that trust walk that you have with Him, and that He reveals it to me to, say we can go now.
Yeah.
So when we, Donna was outside doing the one, several women outside with the sewing machines. When we got back and you were working on the books, a big truck came in, and this woman said, I just closed my sewing room, and do you want all this fabric? I would have, whenever they're together, or sometimes I'm not there. And then I called Donna, and I said, I think we're going to be starting a sewing room. So, God sort of just gives us these little baby steps. to make that
And that
way.
was the piece of wisdom you gave me. I don't think you remember, but when I first started coming to the church, I asked you about your faith walk, and that you said, just take the next faithful step.
Right.
And that was so powerful. It stayed with me. So talk about Honduras. How did it all start with you?
Well, also I feel like God doesn't call the equipped; He equips the called.
Yeah.
Because I'm the less likely person to be in It's like, no, I don't look, less likely. But that's who, look, he puts David out. I don't want the other brothers, I want him. And I think it's the heart.
Yes.
It's the quiet relationship you have with him.
That's right.
Yeah. So I feel like Barbara's being very modest. So maybe Donna, you can explain to us what exists in Guardian Angels, just quickly, like what the programs look like.
Well, the programs, what they look like right now are, this incredible facility that God gave you property on the backside of the Lions Club in Comayagua. And then you were able to build this beautiful open space, light, protected, clean environment for kids to come and spend their days. And they get fed, healthy meals. And there are teachers there who are kind and teach them how to pray and play with them and encourage creativity, and all the things that you had vision for are happening in that, in that space. And then on top of that, this vocational center that's come to life, in a very, very old and unkept, warehouse kind of area. And it's this beautiful classroom now with air conditioning and 13 sewing stations, and it's incredible. And the second round of women are now taking classes there. And this beautiful soul of a woman is teaching these ladies how to make clothes, and she's teaching them the right ways to make beautiful clothes. So it's just incredible. And I think your faithfulness there has grown your reputation now in Honduras. And so now there's this other Lions Club with this other property, and they want you to come and build a similar program there, like a half an hour away from this original place. So it's just amazing the way all of this is growing. But, I just want to emphasize what you said, because you're not the kind of person that's out there starting things. You live with your ear to the ground, though. And you just, when God says, hey, Barbara, you're like, okay, God.
What now?
Really? Can you just show me a little more? It's been amazing. I feel like I've had a front row seat to this whole thing since its beginning. And it's been, sometimes I can't figure out what exactly you're even telling me. What do you mean? And it just keeps on growing and it keeps on unfolding. It's been amazing to watch.
And it's not as though I don't say no.
Right.
When we were off at the second place, they showed me that twice.
Yeah.
And I was like,
It
no.
just wasn't time.
No.
Wasn't,
Yeah.
The
said,
place in La Paz?
Yeah, La Paz. No,
And
I
yet when
can't.
I walked in there the first time, I was so emotional because it was
Yes.
like the Lord can use this
Yeah,
space
yeah.
in such mighty ways.
Yeah.
Like I got
It's-
physically, overcome. And I told you that,
Right.
that I saw it and I was like, this is
We've all had that reaction, though, walking into that space. There's something about it that just gets you emotional. Like there's just life.
Well, that's why I think how God needs to show up for us because we don't know.
Yeah.
And it becomes too overwhelming for us. But we have to keep our eyes focused on the things of heaven.
That's right.
Because they are much easier to understand because our ways are not his ways. And then all of a sudden he puts it in perspective is that you're not doing it.
Yes.
I'm coming before you, bringing the team. The doors will open. It's almost like when La Paz opened up the second location. A few months or maybe a year before that, I met this beautiful woman, nun, who was running this program because I was part of the community.
Sister Edith.
Sister Edith, right, to give boxes to, do you need anything? So I made sure that I introduce
right.
myself. This is where I am. If you need anything, we're here. I send boxes down, and we'd be more than happy to come alongside you.
Yeah.
And then when I heard that she passed away, it was hurt. What happens to the kids? God gives us the heart of compassion and to really mourn.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like, oh, that's so sad. No, we really,
No, yeah.
you have the spirit of compassion. You have the spirit of Christ.
Yeah.
And and so then when they asked us, it was, it was God's journey. So you go in knowing it's God's journey, and then He unfolds it according to His perfect plan, not ours.
Yeah.
It's almost like the first location, of course, was in local here on Long Island, caring for women.
Yes.
Who are locally evicted
That's right.
and giving them housing and resources. And it was really more of like a pay it forward program, a program of teaching people in the community that there are needs here in your neighborhood.
Yes.
And also there are needs, like now when I started the Honduras program, there are needs internationally, like, why are you going there? Why would you do that? Why aren't you just here? And, because God pulls us and stretches us and expands us. And the Honduras started because a girl started working there. And because we give boxes out, and that's how God works, and He just opens up that door to say, you could take this step, you could step of faith. And
I still remember when you and Jimmy decided to go and just see where the boxes went.
Where are we sending these things?
Went anywhere, you know? And you saw the kids wearing the clothes, and it was just quite a thing.
yeah.
Speaking of those kids,
Yes.
oh boy.
Yeah.
They're just gorgeous children. And then they put on that little show for us with the singing. And one of the teachers actually shared with me that they go home and preach Christ to their family. They preach what they
The
learn.
little kids?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the little
That's
guys.
so-
It's amazing. And even from our mission teams, being able to, care for a child there and being able to go and back and check on that child as well. Because sometimes you sponsor a kid and you don't really know.
Well, it's a seed. God doesn't even, we
Yeah.
don't even know where it goes, God just calls us to do, plant that seed and love where we are, and then it'll just flourish, according to His, whether we dropped off the beds or, it's just meeting a need.
Yes.
He just said, go and meet the need.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all I'm calling you to do, but we're always like, but, how are we going to do that? Just go.
Yes.
Just the doors are open, just go.
Yeah.
And sometimes the need is so great that it feels overwhelming. I know that when you were running the medical clinic,
Yes.
it's something that we're constantly facing with every person that you encounter.
Well, it's interesting because when you take a team of American doctors and American nurses and American, lay people, and you go down there, you really have to make a shift because we're only there for a week. We maybe do 4 days of a medical clinic, and you're not going to cure
Right.
anything.
Right.
But you are going to be able to get knee to knee with somebody, look them in the eyes,
Yeah.
talk to them. Maybe it's the first time ever that they've ever had somebody listen to what is concerning them, A lot of times we've met in Honduras, we've met a lot of people that have never been to a doctor, ever, So here we are, and we can't do, we can't cure everything, but what we can do is take away their belly pain for a few weeks, or we can take away, or we can put them in connection with somebody through the program that can then follow up and help them get deeper medical care that they need. But I think the beauty of the medical clinic is using those gifts that God gave the medical community and just going down and actually, being able to look in someone's eyes and feel their heart and hear their cries and cry with them. Very often we cry with them, and I think that that's a beautiful thing. Think about any time that we've ever been in distress. You feel alone and you feel unseen and whatever. And for that day, they're seen and they're cared for and they're, they're thought of and they're prayed for, prayed with.
Yes.
So.
How did it feel being part of the medical missions? Because it was kind of talk a little bit about your role in that.
Well, interesting, because this year when we started, and I've said this to the team that went, but we started and we knew we were going to do a medical mission, but we had no doctors and we only had 2 nurses. So we were.
But also, the medical clinic is like a very serious operation. There's like a triage with nurses.
Yeah.
There's
That's set up very
different
intentionally.
medical
Yes.
stations with different specialties. And then there's a pharmacy, like a
Right.
legit,
Yeah.
Like a real
fully
pharmacy.
equipped pharmacy.
Yeah.
But all of that model was actually born out of a mission that we did in Nicaragua, where I learned when I was working for somebody down there. And I just said, this works. It works efficiently. There's things you can tweak here or there, but it really works efficiently for what we're doing while we're down there. But, I love that Hudson Taylor quote, where, the missionary to China, and he said, God's work will never lack God's supplies. And I love that. I may have missed a word. No, I think that's
No, that's
exactly
right.
how it
That's
is,
right.
right? And I love that, because we didn't have any doctors signing up at the moment, or that I knew of.
That's right, for this year, right?
Our pharmacy person that we had last year was not able to come back, so we didn't have anybody to be in pharmacy. We only had 2 nurses, and then we had a lot of eager people that want to help, which is fantastic, and we turned them into doctors and nurses and pharmacists by the end of the week. Exactly, I know. Ellen is a
They know the
pharmacist.
questions to ask.
That's right.
But I think that is the beauty for a team going down. The beauty is you just say, here I am, send me. And then if you go with that open heart and you just keep that open mind and you go with the flow, all of a sudden you're
Lord
a pharmacist, or you're doing
Yeah.
triage, or you're helping, or you're standing next to a doctor. You're in high school and you're standing next to a doctor, watching things that most medical students don't get to see or experience. That kind of community health. They don't actually always get to experience it on that level. So I think it's exciting that we've had, out of the medical clinic experience, I can count 6 of our students that went as middle schoolers and high schoolers that are now in medical school or nursing school, or out, or already practicing and whatever.
That's
so
cool.
it's just exciting how God gives you an experience and then he builds on that.
Yes.
Or not. I had a Honduran girl who came from the school that's next to the facility in La Paz, and the principal came over and spoke to me and said, I have some students and they want to have this experience, and I said, okay, send them over, whatever, or we can have 1 or whatever, 2, and then we had the interpreters, and the interpreter that I sat with really, really had a heart and said, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a nurse, but I want to do something in medicine. And by the time we were done, she was like, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to do this. So I think it's important. It's really important to just listen. I know, right? But to listen and to hear, God gives us paths that we can take so that he can bring us where he ultimately wants us.
Yes,
So,
it's true.
yeah. But the PS on the Honduras team this year, we wound up having an abundance of
Yes.
doctors.
Wasn't it doctor even actually in construction at one
We
point?
had two doctors that said
floated.
they were only going to do construction,
Yes.
and by the end of not by the end of the week, by the second day, we had pulled them in, and they were fully functioning as doctors. And I was so grateful for them because we had a lot of people. We saw about 500 patients, which was a lot for the time that we were there, and we had about 6 nurses, and it was incredible.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
And a fully fluent, pharmacist.
That to me,
that was
the most beautiful words that
yeah.
Jerry O'Sullivan ever spoke to me was, I have a pharmacist and he speaks Spanish. And I was like, that is beautiful. Right.
And we had the prayer room.
Right, the
Yeah,
prayer room. Last minute.
Last
I
minute.
know.
That was amazing.
That was last minute. Last minute, one of our doctors didn't make it on the trip, and another one of our prayer team from
Yes.
here, and that was the one spot in the medical clinic that we always try to. It's a psychosocial, spiritual,
Right.
physical
That's
being.
right.
That's what we are, and that was the one part that we didn't have somebody to pray with people in Spanish, not through an interpreter, as they were leaving the clinic. We wanted everybody to be prayed for, or at least have that offer. And last minute, who's making it on the plane?
That's how God works.
But
Last
one
minute.
of our sweet, prayer team people. And when she got on the ground, she asked if she could work in the medical clinic. And I said, "Oh, do you think you would mind doing prayer?" And she goes, "Oh, I've been praying for that. What to do?" So it's like God just put it all together.
That's right.
He put the team
That's
together.
I know, we talked about that. But I said last year we were
had a
missing
care team. We
prayer.
need this like caregiving team.
We want this.
Just
Yeah.
that group. So that was
Yeah.
beautiful,
It was incredible.
I do believe that the Lord orchestrates every single person that goes on these missions, every single person that you encounter, all for his purposes and for his glory. And so when he swoops in at the last minute, you can only give him the praise. I want to talk a little bit about these teams or discipleship or what we've seen on missions and how it truly heals us. I know it healed me when I went in more ways than one. The people there, the conversations I was a part of, learnings from you guys. But is there anything that you feel is shaping our church community when you bring back what you've experienced and learned there?
From my perspective, watching, especially the kids, but some of the adults too, they start out in our kind of our talk time at the end of the day, where we're kind of sharing God sightings and moments, And in the beginning, I've seen kids who were totally disconnected and sort of not real interested in the gathering and the meeting, have stories to tell by the end, or a couple people I remember just kind of having more shallow observations in the beginning and then like crying, on day 4 or 5. It's just I've watched the transformation, noticing the ones that are sort of in the back or in the corner, and then all of a sudden they're in the circle and have things that have taken place that they want to share.
It's beautiful.
Also, it's like you leave with, we do preparations so you get to know each other, but you sort of disconnected a little bit, but then you get there, and by the time you come back, you're family.
Yes.
Like each one
sure.
of you I've been on missions trips with, and I feel like it's my heart, you know what I mean? And
that's
I
right.
think that we've had people go on the trip, actually a couple that are very involved in Shelter Rock missions, but also just the church in general, and they're incredible. But the first missions trip I ever did with one of my friends, she said, "I don't even know if I really fully believe any of this. I don't even know if I really know who Jesus is. My husband made me come because he, kind of a thing." And now they are very integral parts of ministry at the church. And there's so many stories like that. So many stories. Not even those kids, all the kids that I talked about that went on to medical school, nursing school, they are all doing that with the purpose of going into medical missions when they get out, So I just think it's transformative.
Yeah.
It's the way, my husband has always asked me, like, how was it? I said, it's exactly how we're supposed to live. Helping people, being in prayer with each other, lifting each other up, encouraging each other, singing praise and worship, giving praises to God. This is how we're supposed to
Doing life together.
This is doing life together, but this is how we're supposed to live every day here in Syosset, Manhasset, Glen Cove, wherever we live.
That's right.
Not just doing life together, but being on mission together
Yes.
and being on
that's
mission
right.
with Jesus.
It's how we
Yeah.
look at our neighbors. It's
Yeah.
how we interact with the
Right.
cashier in the grocery
Yes.
store. It's
Yes.
like being on mission all the
Always.
time.
All the time.
Yeah. There's a missions team, but we're all on mission.
Right.
Yeah.
In whatever we do.
Right.
And I agree fully, because the impact that even one trip had, it made me think like this is the way church should operate.
Yeah.
It's very interesting too, because I'm down there quite often, and I'll see brigades. They call them brigades. So they're not Christian fellowship groups that go down. And they'll come to the golf course where everybody's staying. They'll be so tired, and so they're doing work that they were trained to do in the way that they're able to do it. But I always see, when we seek God in prayer, in preparation, and let Him guide us and walk before us. When Tanya was, came out after the whole day and saw 40 people.
goodness.
She came out and she's like, that was such a great day. I can't wait for tomorrow. We were all like, I remember like all the doctors were around going, what? It's just the filling of this space.
Yes.
We're going in the presence of God,
Yes.
which is a totally different journey.
Absolutely.
So
That's the difference between work and ministry, you know, because work can be draining, ministry invigorates. You can be doing exactly the same thing, but if your perspective is through it, you know, if it's happening from a different point of view, it becomes something that charges you up instead of draining you.
Yeah. And also if God is fueling it.
That's
I was
right.
going to say, it's
That's
not
right.
of us.
That's
It's
right.
it's His Spirit leading
exactly
us. Like
right.
we're just surrendered. We're saying, "Here I am,"
Right.
and we're just taking that next faithful step.
yeah, and it's not applauding any one particular person.
That's
It's
right.
glory to God.
Yes.
that we're able
That's
to,
right.
Yes.
you know,
One of the things I'm always fearful of when you go on a mission, when I go on a missions trip,
Yeah.
is that someone will say, "Oh, that nice lady from America, she came to help me," you know, or whatever, or that nice lady from, you know, Long Island came to help
Right.
me, whatever it is. And that's not what it's about. I want them to see Christ. You know, you want them to see Jesus. You know, is it Matthew 5:6 or something where it says, you know, let your light shine before others so that they may see
Your good works.
your good works and glorify our Father in heaven. That's the purpose, you know, so that they can see that, you know. So, but I also think when you were talking just before about the difference between mission and work, you know what I mean? Imagine if we all switched here, right here where we live,
That's right.
our
That's right.
everyday
That's
focus
exactly
to be
right.
from work to missions. I'm not going to work today. I have a mission today.
Yes.
I'm going on mission today.
Lord, how
and
can you
God's
use
leading
me?
me. You know what I mean? With that person in the cubicle next to you, or the neighbor across the street, or the lady in the
That's the
group.
goal.
And that's the change that happens in the
Yes.
church. You asked about the change and the things that happen within our church, you know, community. And I think that people do come back on mission. You know, they do. And whether it be for a short time, and then they forget and they need to be renewed or reminded, or they come back and they open up a food pantry, which has happened, you know, or they, you know, lots of different things, you know,
Yeah.
that
Right.
God moves you, you know.
You can be knee to knee and face to face and share and listen without needing a translator
Exactly.
in your own language,
Right.
in your community, in your neighborhood.
Right.
So I love how you use this language of discipleship. Like, what are these teams? What kind of discipleship is it? Because all of it is spiritual formation. Like, we're being formed
That's right.
to be like Jesus. And so, you know, I just think that whether it's somewhere international, whether it's right here, but if God's moving your heart for something or someone or a place or a purpose or people,
Yeah.
there's
See,
something.
I feel like the purpose of short-term missions, we're making a little dent, right, in a space in another country or somewhere away from home. But if that experience actually changes how we look at life and who we are back at home, then that to me is the real purpose of short-term missions. It's really a training for the person who's going. It's an eye-opening experience, and if you let God make those adjustments in you, and if God's Spirit has space to actually spark something in you that responds differently to the woman at the cashier in the grocery store, you know, then we're really moving forward. You know, if it causes me to go next door and knock on my neighbor's, you know, hey, I found this in my yard. I was just wondering if just to have a conversation,
Right.
then we're moving forward.
I just think God moves in every heart that is
Yeah.
engaged in any kind of encounter like that, because that's what we come back with. But what we want to be mindful of and wanting is to bless those that we encounter wherever we are, and then connect them with local, you know, service providers or local churches. I mean, we've made contact with local churches in La Paz and Comayagua, and that's been so exciting because now we're creating a network of care, spiritual, medical,
Right.
relational,
Kingdom
and
partnerships.
that we, you know, when we leave, we're not leaving.
Yeah.
It's continuing.
Well, it's also similar to being down there, and now God just opens up these doors where now we could create like a triage where it's just not 1 week, but we could go down and train
Yes.
them to fish to be able to be in charge of managing the healthcare down there. So, we could extend ourselves even more with that guidance that God will provide for us, because we leave saying, oh, well, we wish we could do more, we wish we could set something up. So then, and we do that walk around, we pray, we're obedient, we're seeking God.
You have your ear to the ground, like Donna said.
So
there you go.
I've seen it in action. I've seen it happen.
So
That's
now,
right.
we're talking about triage programs and setting that up, because there's a school like right in the town. By the way, Barbara, there's a nursing school, and they'd love to be part of that triage program you're talking about. And, they're meeting one of the doctors, and she said, well, we could bring a team down there. And okay, so God's sort of moving mountains again, like he does. And
That's right.
And so we just, so
Amazing.
for discipleship with children too, you just want to say, God calls each one of us according to his purposes and according to his time.
Right.
So if that was that seed that dropped for any one of the children, or anyone, even the older people who've come for the first time, it's a beautiful blessing to see, opposed to just going down to work.
Yes.
Because God is much bigger than that.
Yes.
He moves mountains.
Yes.
And he strengthens us.
The scripture says it's not who waters or who plants the seed.
right.
It's the Lord that is going to, bring it all. Yeah. And so, this kind of encapsulates, and I hope this unlocks something in someone's heart, that missions is what we're called to do as a Christian. It's not just going out, it's your neighbor. It's, it's people around you, and to have a heart of obedience, to have a heart to listen to the Lord, a heart to see where he's moving, and just be a willing vessel. Yes, I'm here, Lord. Use me today, and give all glory back to him. I pray that this conversation is just so edifying, encouraging to any of the listeners, because, again, I told you guys, every time I sit with these women, I feel that feeling of I got filled up and I want to go out. So, and that's how it should
It
be.
could be in the simplicity of the mundane.
Yes.
Yeah, the everyday, ordinary moments.
Right. Finding joy
Absolutely.
in that.
It doesn't have to be the big moments. Your
Right.
day to day.
Absolutely.
Right.
Is there anything else you want to share about missions before we close?
I'm excited about the direction Shelter Rock has taken in missions. I think it's really amazing to put a whole lot of different things together, and I love the missional strategy that we have now, doing some big things, but also not forgetting the other, short term or local things that we need to do. And I just think that is very biblical,
Yeah.
I just think, so.
Yeah.
Speaking of missions booklets coming out, if you want to speak to that, Helen, just so our
Stay
church
tuned.
family. Yeah,
We
so-
don't know when, but
we
it's
don't know
coming.
when, but it's coming out, so people can know
Yes.
more about
Right.
what's happening in our
Yeah.
church with regards to missions and how you can maybe get involved. And possibly, do we want to talk about discipleship and groups?
No, I just think that really it's what was just said. Missions is also a part of disciple making. We're trying to become more like Jesus. We're in a season right here in this church where we are paying attention to our own development in our own soul formation. And that includes missions. It includes the concept of being on mission wherever we are, in our neighborhoods, in our schools. Goodness, if we were more involved in our schools, Yeah. No, but it's like wherever we are, it's a different head space, right? It should be a part of our being disciples of Christ. A missional view of what it means to just be a human,
A heart posture towards
Yeah.
what breaks his heart.
That's
It'll
right.
break ours.
That's right. And it will change our reactions when we're in traffic. It'll change our reactions when we hear news on the school loudspeaker. It will change us, and it will make us brighter lights,
Amen.
I find
Yeah.
the location that we have in Seacliff is very much like that.
It is a little lighthouse sitting there.
It is, because we have this cute girl who's 22 years old. She's, so cute with this cute little mousy voice, and welcome in, and, and people have, have hardship.
Yeah.
They cry there, and, we'll pray for them. And,
Yeah. It is a little lighthouse.
it is a little, yes, it's definitely a little lighthouse, and they've left, and then they're smiling, saying, thank you. This is like a therapy session. So, and it's not as though you have to go into a back room. They seem to,
Just
we
right there next to the clothing
we
rack.
all jump in, or, then everybody's like, and even the people who were shopping and putting their arm around this girl yesterday, because she lost her mom. And it's just the people that are shopping part of the moment of keeping it emotional and affectionate and all that stuff. So I think being a light, just opening up that door, being available, being present, being that lighthouse, that salt and light in our community. So,
Well, thank you so much, ladies, for having this conversation with me. Again, I just thank you for your obedience to the Lord. Thank you for everything you're doing for the kingdom. And all glory to the Lord. So thank you for joining us, and come back for the next ministry highlight.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you for having us. It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah.